After my last video on vulnerability, I got a lot of comments and I even got some emails from people. And so I decided to do a part 2 of the vulnerability video. So while I talked about the most solid marriage you can have is when you're absolutely vulnerable and open to the other person. That is absolutely true. And remember what I said is vulnerability is one or the other. You can be vulnerable and that leaves you vulnerable to someone attacking you and tearing you down. And who wants to be there? But then if you don't make yourself vulnerable, then you are also never going to have that solid relationship. I try to keep these videos under 10 minutes because it's such a pain to upload if they're too long, and no one wants to watch lengthy videos, so that's why I was trying to jam a lot of stuff in there. Know that when I do these. And if you do always have comments, please send them my way. If you have questions or a video you want me to address, email me, Christine@breakfastwithbacon.com, and I'll go ahead and ponder them and put them up. But what many people have said, I really need to address because it's true. So what if you decide to be vulnerable and share things with your spouse, but they're not ready to hear them? That is a very valid point. So this vulnerability thing is one where you can't just all of a sudden go, okay, I'm going to tell you everything there is to know about me and shoot, do what you got to do. There is this dance that we take part in. I share a little bit with my spouse, and hopefully he'll share a little bit back with me, and then I'll share a little bit more. That's what you do when you first started dating, right? You started out talking with the shallow things with each other. Oh my gosh, I like pizza. Oh my gosh, my birthday's December 12th. And yours is December 14th. That's awesome, right? You share all these kind of superficial things. And as you go into the relationship, you open up about your fears and your failings and your mistakes and your desires and the things you think they might laugh at or could throw at, or just things you want to protect. So when it comes to vulnerability, if we can't have that balance, it's going to be very, very difficult, because what vulnerability also does is it gives weapons into the quiver of your enemy. So if I keep telling my husband every mistake I ever made, every fear, every failure, every flaw, and he hears them, but he never shares any, then I have nothing in my quiver. Now, why is that important? Well, I shouldn't have to have anything in my quiver. But when there's a fight and vulnerability has been disproportionate, the person who has all the weapons against you, well, you did this, you did this, you did this, so you're attracted to other men, you must be looking for it. And you have nothing to give back to them. They've protected themselves. I'll tell you, in my difficult marriage, that was one of the things that took the longest to get to my husband. He didn't understand that concept. So I would try really hard to keep sharing things, but they were constantly thrown in my face. And I always try to say, my husband is not a bad man, but we had to learn to figure these things out, as is, nor would he say I'm a bad woman. But geez, marriage is way harder than we ever expected it's going to be for most of us. So vulnerability is something, if you are encouraged to be more vulnerable, I would challenge you to see how is your partner. So let's go this way. You're more vulnerable. You're sharing things, but you're not getting anything back. That might be a conversation you want to say with your spouse, with the person you're in a relationship with. For those of you that are dating, absolutely. I mean, you think about abusers. Abusers take everything you give them, but very rarely do they share their deepest, darkest things with you, because most people who were abused will abuse, and so these abusers are protecting the own pains that they had from their past, their youth, their childhood. And so I would say there's a balance. If they're not sharing too much with you, of course, my first instinct is to say don't share too much with them, but don't be disproportionate. But also encourage them. Like, I would never use anything against you. And there's this low level of trust that you don't share anything with me. I've shared this with you and that with you, and I've told you about this and that, and let's talk about some of the things that you're afraid of. Kind of getting that person to go there. And if they don't, again, let's hope you're not married yet, right? So it's like, if you're not married and they're not being vulnerable, do not get into that relationship further until you can get this. It is so stinking hard because you feel naked. But it doesn't mean break up with the person. It just means know that if they're afraid to share things when you're apart or when you're not yet married, it's going to be even harder later. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you'll earn their trust. Now, the other way around, if your partner is vulnerable and he or she is sharing, but you're not, I'd like you to check yourself. Because if they're sharing things about themselves, but you just still keep protecting, oh, I remember when I was hurt by this person or that person, I told myself I would never tell anybody else A, B, and C. But maybe this person's different. And maybe this person has shown you that they've been vulnerable with you. They're opening up. And they're showing you their fears, flaws, and failings. This is your opportunity to really say, all right, yeah, here's some of the things I'm thinking. Now, in a perfect world, none of us would ever bring those things back up. As I did in my last video, when you share something about yourself, I hated when I was a kid and they used to call me black-eyed peas because of the black circles around my eyes. You hand someone the gift of yourself, like, I'm telling you something, please treasure that, right? You hope that they hold it in. You hope that they, take care of that because that's a piece of you. But it's very honest, in a fight, and they could go, bam, remember that time that black-eyed peas? And when someone does that, boy, we pull back. One last thing is the example someone emailed me was, if I find that I'm attracted to another woman, and then I tell that to my spouse, then she might throw that in my face. Oh, yeah, remember you said you're the one that's looking for other people. Yeah, again, we have to be very careful with that. This is something you can't necessarily always do on your own. This is something where you sometimes need a third party, an outsider like me, who can help you navigate that and help the one person see, well, wait, you want honesty, yet you're not willing to accept it when you get it. And no, that's not what that means. Because I say in my sessions, you don't cease to be attractive to other people, nor do you cease to be attracted. And then I look at the other one like, isn't that true for you? You're not attractive to anyone anymore? So I'm able to kind of put people on the spot and say, what he's saying in being vulnerable, what she's saying in being vulnerable is not weird. In the first video, what I was alluding to is a three-legged stool. If you already have a relationship that's good, I think of an example of a couple, friend that I know. She worked with me. He was a chaplain in the military, and they had made a promise to each other because he was deploying and he went overseas, that if he ever had these weak moments in her, that they would share it with each other. And that's really what I was pointing to, because he was gone, he was lonely, he was away from her, and he's in a military unit where he has to talk to the men and the women. And there was one woman who was spending much more time with him, and he could tell was attracted to her, and he felt this awkwardness. So what he did is he called his wife and he talked to her about it. He said, there's this woman here and blah, 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 blah. And so what they did is they prayed together, and the funny thing is once he shared that, once you share that with your spouse, it's like a three-legged stool and you've kicked one of the legs out. And the temptation that might have been given from that other person, might have been a test, becomes weakened. And his relationship with his wife was strengthened, knowing she was praying for him back at home too. So if I did a poor example of vulnerability, that's what I was alluding to. So never go full force into, I'm going to be totally vulnerable even though you've never shown it. You have to work it as a dance. Give a little, get a little, give a little, get a little, and work each day of your life till the both of you are getting as deep and as vulnerable with each other as you possibly can be. If you need any help, you know where to find me. I'm Dr. Christine Bacon. You're watching an informational bacon bit. Maybe it's breaking bacon. And I'd like to remind you always to live your life sunny side up.